Welcome back to another episode of Jordan Peterson Says Random Words That Mean Nothing. Today we've got 6 minutes of pure, unfiltered word soup where our favorite Canadian psychology professor attempts to explain the fundamental nature of reality. We're talking ancient Mesopotamian gods, quantum mechanics, evolutionary biology, and Carl Jung all blended together like ingredients in a philosophical nightmare smoothie that nobody ordered but Jordan keeps serving anyway. I'm warning you right now, by the end of this video, you're going to witness a man connect Babylonian creation myths to modern neuroscience with the confidence of someone who just discovered fire. It's like watching someone try to fix a computer with a hammer while explaining how the hammer is actually a metaphor for the cosmic struggle between order and chaos. So grab your lobster claws and clean your room, because we're diving deep into the Peterson verse where everything means everything and nothing makes sense.
Man, this is really a complicated problem. I don't know if I can answer this. Okay, let's try this. God, it's been years since I thought about this and wrote about it, so we'll see how I can do.
Right off the bat, we get the classic Peterson disclaimer. I haven't thought about this in years, but let me just wing it for 6 minutes on camera. This is like watching someone try to perform brain surgery while admitting they skipped medical school. The confidence to just ramble about the fundamental nature of reality without preparation is genuinely impressive.
You could think about this from a perspective of Piagetian constructivism. So imagine that what you confront fundamentally in the world is what is unknowable. And what is unknowable has an intrinsic meaning. It's both frightening and compelling.
Here we go, Peterson's favorite move, taking something relatively simple and making it sound profound by adding unnecessary layers. Yes, humans are curious about the unknown. This is basic psychology. But Peterson can't just say, people are naturally curious and cautious about unfamiliar things. No. He has to frame it as some cosmic truth about intrinsic meaning in the unknowable. It's like ordering a cheeseburger and the waiter brings you a deconstructed bovine experience with fermented dairy consciousness. Just give me the burger, Jordan.
Simultaneously, it activates predator detection systems that protect you in the way that a prey animal is protected by freezing and withdrawal and that sort of thing, but it also makes you curious. So that which you do not understand, which is something that you can conceptualize as that which has not yet been made habitable world, has an intrinsic meaning. Now the question is whether the fundamental stuff of the world is that meaningful unknown or something material. You can make the case that what we recognize as material is actually a pragmatic reconceptualization of the meaning, of the ambivalent meaning of the unknowable.
We've officially entered the Peterson twilight zone where material reality might not be real. He's trying to argue that maybe material reality isn't actually real, it's just a pragmatic conceptualization. This is where Peterson reveals he's been reading too much continental philosophy and not enough actual science. Material scientists, physicists, and chemists around the world are probably watching this going, well, I guess all our experiments were just pragmatic illusions. The laptop you're watching this on? Just a pragmatic conceptualization, apparently. The chair you're sitting in? Purely psychological. And can we talk about this sentence structure? A pragmatic conceptualization of the meaning of the ambivalent meaning of the unknowable. This is what happens when you use a thesaurus as a GPS.
Now, I know that's hard. That's a hard concept, but imagine, you see, it depends on whether or not you believe that our descriptions of material reality are the superordinate descriptions of reality, or whether our conceptualization of material is actually a form of pragmatic tool use that's oriented towards our survival. And this is not an easy thing to sort out. It's something that I did try to sort out to some degree with Sam. You know, do we have an objective description of reality, and is reality something that can be objectively described, or are we using a technology that produces so-called objective representations to facilitate our tool use?
Jordan's presenting this like he discovered some groundbreaking philosophical problem, but philosophers have been arguing about whether we can know objective reality since ancient Greece. Plato had entire dialogues about this. Jordan didn't stumble onto some revolutionary insight, he just discovered that thinking is hard. But notice how Peterson frames this. He's positioning himself as the one wrestling with deep questions about objective reality, as if he's some kind of philosophical pioneer. Meanwhile, philosophers have been debating these questions for literally thousands of years. Peterson didn't discover the problem of objective knowledge, he just discovered it was really hard to think about while also trying to sound smart on podcasts.
It's a hard question, right? Because obviously our advanced technology, which we use in a tool-like fashion, is a consequence of our materialist science, which begs the question, is the fundamental purpose of the science descriptive or pragmatic? Now, I tend to think it's pragmatic, because I think our fundamental problem is a problem of survival.
Jordan accidentally stumbles onto something that's actually correct. Evolutionary epistemology is a real thing. Our brains did evolve for survival, not for understanding cosmic truth. This is actually a fascinating area of study with real research and everything. But of course, Jordan can't just say, evolution shaped our thinking to help us survive, so our perception of reality is biased toward practical problem solving rather than absolute truth. That would be too simple, too clear, too useful. Instead, he has to wrap it in all this mystical language about chaotic potential and intrinsic meaning, like he's some kind of philosophical wizard casting spells with big words. It's like he found a perfectly good scientific insight and decided to bedazzle it with crystal healing energy and ancient mythology. He takes evolutionary psychology and somehow turns it into Lord of the Rings fan fiction.
So there's a way of looking at the world where the fundamental reality is the chaotic potential that gives rise to fear and curiosity. And that's how your nervous system responds, by the way. And see, that's interesting to me, because I would say, well, it's a truism of evolutionary biology that what your nervous system is adapted to, what you're adapted to as a consequence of your 3.5 billion years of evolution, is reality, and that there's no other real way of defining it. And so the way your brain construes reality is as if what you're confronting is an indeterminate chaotic potential that first generates something like apprehension, fear, and curiosity.
Jordan is basically describing what psychologists call the orienting response. When you encounter something new, you pay attention to it because it might be important. This is first-year psychology stuff. Every intro psych student learns about this. But Peterson can't just say, we evolved to notice new things because it helped us not get eaten. No, instead we get indeterminate chaotic potential, because apparently Jordan thinks his audience consists entirely of philosophy professors who communicate exclusively in abstract concepts. He's describing the fact that humans get startled by unexpected noises and turn it into some kind of cosmic battle between consciousness and the void. This is like describing how you check both ways before crossing the street as engaging in a ritualistic dance with the infinite possibilities of automotive chaos. Jordan, sometimes simple explanations are better because they're actually comprehensible. Your brain noticing new stuff isn't a profound metaphysical truth, it's just Tuesday.
Secondarily, the apprehension to freeze you so that you don't get eaten or destroyed, and the curiosity to allow you to engage with what's unknown and to transform it into habitable territory, which in large part consists of tools. Now, the unus mundus that Pauli and Jung talked about seems to me to be associated with this idea of that chaotic potential.
And here we go. Peterson just name-dropped Wolfgang Pauli and Carl Jung like they're his personal consultants on reality. The unus mundus, by the way, was Jung's idea about a unified reality underlying mind and matter. But here's the thing Jordan conveniently ignores. Jung was writing in the 1950s, and Pauli was a physicist trying to bridge quantum mechanics with psychology before we really understood either field properly. This is like using medical advice from the 1950s when doctors recommended smoking for your nerves. Jung had some interesting ideas about the human psyche, but he also thought alchemy was a legitimate psychological practice and that flying saucers were meaningful psychological phenomena. The man was brilliant but also believed in some absolutely wild stuff that hasn't held up to modern scrutiny. Peterson is taking concepts that were speculative 70 years ago and treating them like they're established scientific fact. It's like building a rocket ship based on Jules Verne novels and then acting surprised when it doesn't reach the moon. Jung and Pauli were doing the best they could with the knowledge they had, but we've learned a few things about psychology and physics since then. But Peterson loves Jung because Jung gives him permission to treat psychological concepts like mystical truths instead of, testable theories about how minds work.
And I think that's related to the physicist Wheeler's proposition that the fundamental reality of the world is information rather than material. That material is a secondary, what would you call it? It's a secondary manifestation of information. And I think that what we confront in the world, I don't think we're driven by the past or determined by the present. I think what we do is we apprehend the potential of the future, the chaotic potential of the future.
Jordan is trying to sound deep about how humans can think about the future, which is like trying to sound profound about the fact that fish can swim. Yes, humans have evolved the ability to model possible future scenarios and plan accordingly. This is what cognitive scientists call perspective thinking, and it's one of our most important mental abilities. But Peterson can't just say, humans are really good at imagining what might happen and preparing for it. He has to make it sound like we're cosmic fortune tellers channeling the raw essence of temporal chaos. Apprehending the chaotic potential of the future, Jordan, you're describing anxiety. You're describing what happens when someone thinks, what if I fail this job interview, and turns it into a philosophical dissertation on the nature of temporal experience. This is peak Peterson, taking normal human cognition and making it sound like we're all secret prophets wrestling with the fundamental forces of existence. Next, he's going to tell us that making grocery lists is actually a sacred ritual where we commune with the archetypal energies of nourishment and abundance. The man cannot describe basic psychological processes without making them sound like deleted scenes from Doctor Strange.
And I think that that's associated with the tohu vabohu, which is the chaotic potential that God confronted with the Logos at the beginning of time in Genesis.
And now we've officially gone full Peterson. We're connecting human anxiety about the future to the biblical creation story because apparently everything is connected to everything in Jordan's mind. Tohu wabohu is Hebrew for formless and void, the primordial chaos before God created order in Genesis. Jordan is taking a psychological observation about how humans plan for the future and somehow connecting it to ancient Hebrew cosmology. It's like saying, the reason you check the weather forecast is actually because you're participating in the eternal struggle between order and chaos that began at the dawn of creation. Not everything is a mythological reenactment of cosmic principles. Your grocery list is not a sacred text. Your Netflix algorithm is not channeling archetypal energies. This is what happens when someone reads way too much Carl Jung and starts seeing archetypal patterns in their breakfast cereal. Peterson has basically turned regular human behavior into a religious experience, and honestly, that explains why his fans treat him like a guru instead of a psychologist. He's not doing psychology anymore, he's doing theology disguised as science, and that's how you end up connecting your morning commute to the book of Genesis.
I think the Genesis story is a reflection of that fundamental truth. And I think that that capability characterizes us. And so the unus mundus is the informational substrate that constitutes the world before it's divided into psyche, so that would be spirit, that'd be human spirit and consciousness, and material. So there's something underneath that, and this is what Jung and Pauli were driving at in my understanding. There's something underneath that, which is the pre-division unity of reality. And that's something like the tohu va bohu, or the teom, which is etymologically cognate, by the way, with the word Tiamat. And Tiamat is the goddess that the Mesopotamian creator god Marduk confronted and cut into pieces and made the world from.
Holy lobster claws. Jordan just connected Hebrew creation mythology to Babylonian epic poetry through etymology that he may or may not have completely made up. We've gone from humans can plan for the future to ancient gods battled primordial sea monsters to create reality. This is like starting a conversation about why your car won't start and somehow ending up discussing the mating habits of extinct pterodactyls. Tiamat was a primordial goddess in the Babylonian creation epic, and yes, Marduk did defeat her and create the world from her body. But Jordan is now claiming that this 4,000-year-old myth somehow validates his theories about how human psychology works. This is like saying Spider-Man comics prove that radioactive spider bites give you superpowers. And can we talk about how casual Jordan is about this absolutely insane connection he just made? By the way, like he's mentioning that it might rain later, not connecting modern neuroscience to ancient Mesopotamian religious texts through questionable etymology. The confidence is genuinely breathtaking. This is where Peterson reveals that he's not actually doing psychology, he's creating his own personal mythology where everything connects to everything else through a web of ancient stories and half-remembered theories. He's basically become the Dan Brown of psychology, connecting dots that don't actually connect but making it sound really exciting. Jordan has turned academic research into a conspiracy theory where all of human knowledge secretly points to the same conclusion, that Jordan Peterson understands how everything works.
So that's all outlined in Maps of Meaning, although not so much the unus mundus hypothesis. And I haven't thought about that for a while. I wrote about it, but these were in papers I never published because they were too damn complicated.
And here's the grand finale, Jordan admitting that he wrote papers about this stuff but never published them because they were too damn complicated. This is academic speak for, nobody could figure out what the hell I was talking about. He's basically saying, I had these brilliant insights but they were too advanced for the peer review process. This is like saying, I invented a revolutionary new form of mathematics but it was too sophisticated for mathematicians to understand. Jordan, if you can't explain your ideas clearly enough for experts in the field to follow them, that's not because your ideas are too advanced, it's because they don't make sense. The whole point of academic publishing is to present ideas in a way that can be understood, tested, and built upon by other researchers. But Peterson frames this as if he's some misunderstood genius whose insights are too profound for the academic establishment. This is how Peterson maintains his mystique, by claiming his unpublished, incomprehensible theories contain deep truths that the academic world isn't ready for. It's like being a self-proclaimed prophet whose prophecies are too complex for mortals to understand.
And I tried to publish them a couple of times, but people didn't understand what I was talking about.
What we just witnessed is a masterpiece of intellectual performance art, and by performance art, I mean the kind where everyone pretends to understand what's happening while secretly wondering if the artist has completely lost their mind. Jordan Peterson just spent 6 minutes connecting basic human psychology to ancient creation myths with the confidence of someone who just discovered that water is wet and decided to write a PhD dissertation about it. Let's be absolutely clear about what happened here. Peterson took the straightforward concept that humans evolved to notice new things and plan for the future, and somehow turned it into a cosmic opera featuring Hebrew creation stories, Babylonian mythology, Carl Jung's questionable ideas, and quantum physics he clearly doesn't understand. The truly magnificent thing about this performance is how Peterson manages to sound incredibly learned while saying absolutely nothing concrete. He name-drops legitimate scientists like Piaget and Pauli, references real psychological concepts like constructivism, and throws around terms from actual fields of study. But he uses all of this like intellectual seasoning to make his word salad taste sophisticated instead of actually engaging with any of these ideas in a rigorous way. This is the Peterson method in its purest form. Take something that's actually kind of interesting from real science, wrap it in mystical language that makes it sound profound, connect it to ancient mythology because apparently everything is connected to everything else, and then present the whole mess as if it's a revolutionary insight that lesser minds simply can't grasp. It's like intellectual free card Monty. Keep the audience distracted with fancy language while you slip in ideas that wouldn't survive 5 minutes of actual scrutiny. And let's talk about the absolutely breathtaking arrogance of claiming that his unpublished papers were too damn complicated for the academic world to understand. This is a man who just spent 6 minutes connecting anxiety about the future to Mesopotamian creation myths, and he thinks the problem is that other people aren't smart enough to follow his reasoning. Jordan, when professional psychologists can't understand your psychology papers, the problem isn't that psychology is too complicated, the problem is that you're not doing psychology anymore. What Peterson is really doing here is creating his own personal mythology where he gets to be the wise man who sees connections that nobody else can see. He's not interested in the careful, methodical work of actual science. He wants to be the guru who explains how everything fits together in one grand theory of everything. It's the intellectual equivalent of those conspiracy theory boards with red string connecting random photos, except Peterson uses ancient mythology instead of blurry photographs of UFOs. Peterson can't just engage with these ideas on their own terms. He has to turn everything into part of his personal brand of mystical psychology where ancient wisdom validates modern insights and everything connects to everything else through the magic of archetypal thinking. And his audience gets to feel smart by pretending they understand what he's talking about. This is why Peterson drives actual academics completely insane. He takes their carefully researched ideas, strips away all the nuance and evidence, adds a bunch of mythological garnish, and serves it up as if he discovered fire. It's academic stolen valor, taking credit for insights you didn't have and understanding you don't actually possess. The really tragic thing is that Peterson clearly has read widely and thought about these topics. But somewhere along the way, he became more interested in sounding like a profound thinker than in actually doing the hard work of careful thinking. He discovered that you can sound incredibly wise by speaking in vague, abstract terms about deep topics, and that most people won't call you out as long as you reference enough impressive-sounding sources. What we're watching here isn't wisdom. It's the intellectual equivalent of a magic show where the magician has started believing in their own tricks. Peterson has convinced himself that his verbal sleight of hand actually reveals deep truths about reality, when really it just reveals how good he is at making simple ideas sound complicated and complicated ideas sound incomprehensible. And that's the ultimate Peterson paradox. He's simultaneously too complex to understand and too simple to take seriously. His ideas sound profound until you try to figure out what they actually mean, and then you realize there's less there than meets the eye. It's like unwrapping a beautifully decorated present only to find another box, and then another box, and eventually you realize it's boxes all the way down. So the next time someone tells you that Jordan Peterson is a brilliant thinker who's just too sophisticated for mainstream academia, show them this video. Because what we just watched isn't genius. It's what happens when someone smart enough to sound impressive becomes convinced that sounding impressive is the same thing as being right.
And I tried to publish them a couple of times, but people didn't understand what I was talking about.